that we need. His lotus feet serve as protection from all kinds of fear. Madhvacharya has given some very interesting quotes. Moksha shantischa sharanam nirvanam cha abhidhiyate iti brahme. According to Brahma Purana, moksha, liberation, shanti, peace, sharanam, surrender or shelter, and nirvanam, extinguishing the fire of material existence. All of these are synonyms. Then he is referring to a Bhagavatam statement that Parikshit Maharaj, he attained the lotus feet of Garuda Dhvaja. That should be compared to other statements of Bhagavatam that Parikshit Maharaj attained liberation. So which means that liberation is attaining the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Charanam bhayad rakshanam sarvesham kamanam varasya varnasyapi harerangir aspadam. The shelter of Lord Hari's lotus feet is required even if one wants to attain all kinds of material desires. Vikrama iti Paramatma virajor abhedeno uktihi. In this verse, the Paramatma and the universal form are considered to be non-different. For absolute protection from all sorts of fear as well as for all our needs of life, we must take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, not only in this planet, but also in all the upper, lower, and heavenly planets. This absolute dependence on the lotus feet of the Lord is called pure devotion service, and it is indirect and it is directly hinted at within this passage. No one should have any kind of doubt in this matter, nor should one be inclined to seek the help of any other demigods, because all of them are dependent on him only. Everyone except the Lord himself is dependent on the mercy of the Lord. Even the all-pervading super soul is also dependent on the supreme aspect of Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. State. Apam viryasya sargasya parjanyasya prajapate pumsashishna upastastu prajatyananda nirvritte. From the Lord's genitals originate water, semen, generatives, rain, and the procreators. His genitals are the cause of a pleasure that contracts the distress of begetting. All covered here. The genitals and the pleasure of begetting counteract the distresses of family encumbrances. One would cease to generate altogether. If that means one would cease to beget children altogether. If there were not, by the grace of the Lord, a coating, a pleasure-giving substance on the surface of the generative organs, this substance gives a pleasure so intense that it counteracts fully the distress of family encumbrances. A person is so captivated by this pleasure-giving substance that he is not satisfied by begetting a single child, but increases the number of children with great risk in regard to maintaining them simply for this pleasure-giving substance. This is referring to sinless materialists. Sinful materialists, they will engage in various activities to enjoy sex life, but prevent childbirth. This pleasure-giving substance is not false, however, because it originates from the transcendental body of the Lord. In other words, the pleasure-giving substance is a reality, but has taken on an aspect of pervertedness on account of material contamination. In the material world, sex life is the cause of many distresses. on account of material contact. Therefore, sex life in the material world should not be encouraged beyond the necessity. There is a necessity for generating progeny even in the material world, but such generation of children must be carried out with full responsibility for spiritual values. The spiritual values of life can be realized in the human form of material existence, and the human being to adopt family planning with reference to the context of spiritual value, not otherwise. So, for spiritual purpose, one should um, engage in the proper method of birth control, which is through celibacy. The degraded form of family restriction by the use of contraceptives, etc., is the grossest type of material contamination. Materialists who use these devices want to fully utilize the pleasure potency of the coating on the genitals by artificial means without knowing the spiritual importance of the human form of life. See, this contraceptives, even though it has become very popular in today's world, it has not helped people from establishing stable families, because lust destroys love. I mean, the sort of selfless love that is required to maintain a family. And sinful lust will certainly destroy it. And unrestricted lust will turn to be sinful lust. So unless one is self-disciplined, trustworthy, and trusting, there is no question of stable family life. Now, all of this will be destroyed through lust, anger, and greed. Therefore, they are described as three gateways to hell. So, this usage of contraceptives, birth control operations, and so on, this does not stop, this does not solve the problems of lust, anger, and greed. It just aggravates it. In other words, without knowledge of spiritual values, the less intelligent man tries to utilize only the material sense pleasure or of the genitals. So one needs a higher taste, a spiritual taste, to get rid of lower tastes. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. Text 9. Payur yamasya mitrasya parimokshasya narada. Himsaya nirvriter mrityor nirayasya gudam smrita. O Narada, evacuating outlet of the universal form of the Lord is the abode of the controlling deity of death, Mitra, and the evacuating hole and the rectum of the Lord is the place of envy, misfortune, death, hell, etc. In 2.5.30, Mitra is said to be the presiding deity of this evacuating outlet. But from 3.26.66, we understand that it is actually Mrityu who is the presiding deity. Text 10. पराभूते अधर्मस्य तमश्चा विपश्चिमः नाड्यो नदनदीनां च गोत्राणाम् अस्ति संहतिः. The back of the Lord is the place for all kinds of frustration and ignorance as well as for morality. From his veins flow the great rivers and rivulets, and on his bones are stacked the great mountains. In order to defy the impersonal conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a systematic analysis of the physiological and anatomical constitution of his transcendental body is given here. It is clear from the available description of the body of the Lord, his universal form, that the form of the Lord is distinct from the forms of ordinary mundane conception. In any case, he is never a formless void. Ignorance is the back of the Lord, and therefore the ignorance of the less intelligent class of men is also not separate from his bodily conception. Since his body is the complete whole of everything that be, one cannot assert that he is impersonal only. On the contrary, the perfect description of the Lord holds that he is both impersonal and personal simultaneously. The personality of Godhead is the original feature of the Lord, and his impersonal emanation is but the reflection of his transcendental body. Those who are fortunate enough to have a view of the Lord from the front can realize his personal feature, whereas those who are frustrated and are thus kept on the ignorance side of the Lord, or in other words, those who have the view of the Lord from the back, realize him in his impersonal feature. Text 11. Avyaktarasa sindhunam bhutanam nidhanasya cha udaram viditam pumso hridayam manasah padam. The impersonal feature of the Lord is the abode of the great oceans, and his belly is the resting place for the materially annihilated living entities. His heart is the abode of the subtle material bodies of the living beings. Thus it is known by the intelligent class of men. The Kumaras, Brahma, Rudra, and others, they have all come from Lord Hari. According to Garuda Purana, even though Lord Hari is not different from his body, his senses, etc., still he is described as being different from them. He is, this is simply due to his pure opulence. He has no beginning. He is a very concentrated form of bliss and knowledge. The Bhagavad Gita, 8.17 to 18, it is stated that according to human calculations, one day of Brahma is equal to 1,000 cycles of 4 millenniums, 4,320,000 years. And that the same period is also calculated to be his night. A Brahma lives for 100 such years and then dies. A Brahma, who is generally a great devotee of the Lord, attains liberation after such a downfall. The universe, called the Brahmanda, or the round football-like domain controlled by a Brahma, is thus annihilated, and thus the inhabitants of a particular planet or of the whole universe are also annihilated. Avyakta, mentioned here in this verse, means the night of Brahma, when partial annihilation takes place and the living entities of that particular Brahmanda up to the planets of Brahmaloka, along with the big oceans, etc., all repose, rest in the belly of the Virat Purusha. At the end of a Brahma's night, the creation again takes place, and the living entities reserved within the body, within the belly of the Lord, are let loose to play their respective parts, as if being awakened from a deep slumber. Since the living entities are never destroyed, the annihilation of the material world does not annihilate the existence of the living beings. But until liberation is attained, one has to accept one material body after another again and again. The human life is meant for making a solution to this repeated change of bodies, and thereby attaining a place in the spiritual sky where everything is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. In other words, the subtle forms of the living entities rest within the heart of the Supreme Being, and such forms take tangible shape at the time of creation. Text 12. Dharmasya mamatubhyam cha kumaranam bhavasya cha vijnanasya cha sattvasya parasyatma parayanam. Also, the consciousness of that great personality is the abode of religious principles, mine, yours, Lord Shiva's, and those of the four bachelors, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar. That consciousness is also the abode of truth, and transcendental knowledge. Text 13 to 16. Aham bhavan bhavaschaiva ime munayograja sura sura naranaga kagamriga sarisripa gandharvapsaraso yaksha raksho bhuta ganoraga पशवः पितरः सिद्धा विद्याद्राश्चारणा द्रुमा अन्ये च विविधा जीवा जलस्थलनभौ कसः गृहर्क्षकेतवस्ताराः अडितस्तनयित्मवः सर्वं पुरुषे वेदं भूतं भव्यं भवच्च यत् तेनेदमावृतं विश्वं वितस्तिम् अधितिष्ठति. Beginning from me, Brahma, down to you and Bhava, Shiva, all the great sages who were born before you, the demigods, the demons, the nagas, the human beings, the birds, the beasts, the reptiles, etc., as well as all phenomenal manifestations of the universes, namely the planets, stars, asteroids, luminaries, lightning, and thunder, along with the inhabitants of the different planetary systems, namely the Gandharvas, Apsaras, Yakshas, Rakshas, Rakshas means Rakshasas, Bhutaganas, ghosts, Uragas, snakes. Yeah, these things are. Pashus, Pitas is Pitris, Siddhas, Vidyadharas, Charanas, and all other different varieties of living entities, including the birds, beasts, trees, and everything that we all are covered by the universal form of the Lord at all times, namely past, present, and future, although he is transcendental to all of them, eternally existing in a form not exceeding 9 inches. Brahmatarka. Sarvam Purusham Purusha Eveti Bhanyate. This is actually a paraphrase of something in the Purusha Sukta. Purusha Evedam Sarvam Yadbhutam Yacha Bhavyam. So, according to Brahmatarka, uh, the universe actually possesses differences from the Supreme Lord. The universe is different from the Supreme Lord. But it should be noted that the existence of the universe and so on are entirely dependent on that Purusha at all times. So because of that, it is stated like this. When one's existence, functioning, and awareness are entirely dependent on somebody else's existence, functioning, and awareness, satta, sthiti, pratiti, then they are equated. Evam tavat Parameshwara jatam vishwam tatah na bhinnam. So the point is, the universe, which is born from the Supreme Lord, is not separate from him. Yatha kundalam suvarnan na prithak. Just as a gold earring is not distinct from gold. It is not non-gold, that's the point. Sa to sarvaniyanta sarva prakashaka nityamukta ityarthaduktam. But he is the controller, who is the controller of all and who manifests everything. He is eternally liberated. Etadeva Purusha Suktartha Kathanena Dradhayati. And this is reinforced by Brahma by explaining the import of the Purusha Sukta. Then he's giving, he's pointing out which portions of Purusha Sukta refers to which verse of this chapter. In the previous chapter itself, the half Vedic hymn beginning with Sahasra Shirsha was paraphrased in text 12 of the previous chapter, in 3 verses beginning with text 12 of the previous chapter. Purusha evedam sarvam. This is the second second. Okay, now I understand. The Purusha Sukta texts Sasra Shirsha Purusha, Sasraksha, Sasrapat, as well as Brahmanosya Mukhamasi. That is also from Purusha Sukta only. All of these have been explained in the previous chapter. So there are 3 texts from Purusha Sukta. They have been explained in the previous chapter of Bhagavatam. Now, Purusha evedam sarvam yadbhutam etcha bhavyam. That's another, it's the second verse of Purusha Sukta. That meaning is pointed out in 3.5 verses, beginning with Aham Bhavan. Sarvamidam Purusha eva, na tatah prithak ityarthaha. Everything is the Purusha. That means nothing is separate from him. Sarvumim Vishvato, there is another verse in the Purusha Sukta. It is not possible to measure his extent. This is not properly. So far, it was pointed out that Lord Vishnu is the cause of prapancha, material existence. Now it is pointed out that he is beyond material existence. The bhumim sarvata sprishtva atyatishtat dashangulam. It's all Purusha Sukta. एवं माया शक्तिमतः परमेश्वराय जातं जगत् न ततः भिन्नम् इति पुरुष सूत्रार्थ कथनेन निर्णयति. The Supreme Lord, as the possessor of the potency of Maya, is not separate from the universe that is born from him. Which is already covered here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his partial representation as a super soul measuring not more than 9 inches, expands by his potent energy in the shape of the universal form, which includes everything manifested in different varieties of organic and inorganic materials. The manifested varieties of the universe are therefore not different from the Lord, just as gold ornaments of different shapes and forms are not different from the original stock reserve of gold. In other words, the Lord is a supreme person who controls everything within the creation and still remains a supreme separate identity, distinct from all manifested material creation. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.4 to 5, he is therefore said to be Yogeshwara. Everything rests on the potency of Lord Sri Krishna, and still the Lord is different from and transcendental to all such identities. In the Vedic Purusha Sukta of the Rig Mantra, this is confirmed. This philosophical truth of simultaneous oneness and difference was propounded by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it is known as Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. Brahma, Narada, and all others are simultaneously one with the Supreme Lord and different from him. We are all one with him in quality, just as the gold ornaments are one in quality with the stock gold. But the individual gold ornament is never equal in quantity with the stock gold. The stock gold is never exhausted, even if there are innumerable ornaments emanating from the stock, because the stock is Purnam, complete. Even if Purnam is deducted from the Purnam, still the Supreme Purnam remains the same Purnam. This is applicable to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This fact is inconceivable to our present imperfect senses. Lord Chaitanya therefore defined his theory of philosophy as achintya, inconceivable, and has confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita as well as in the Bhagavatam, Lord Chaitanya's theory of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva is the perfect philosophy of the absolute truth. Text 17. Swadhishnyam pratapan prano bahischa pratapatyasau evam virajam pratapams tapatyantam bahihpuman. The sun illuminates both internally and externally by expanding its radiation. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by expanding his universal form, maintains everything in the creation both internally and externally. Etat sadrishtantamaha. Now he gives an example. Just as the sun illuminates both internally and externally, like that, the universal form, it illuminates the body, that means the Brahmanda, internally and externally also. Virajam pratapan virat prakashakatvena prastuyamana kuman Sri Bhagavatatvapi evam antaranga tripad vibhuti rupam bahih bahiranga pada vibhuti rupam pratapati prakashayati. So this universal form, he is Sri Bhagavan. He's the truth of Bhagavan, the principle of Bhagavan. And he illuminates internally and externally. Internally refers to the triquadrantal manifestation of the Vaikuntha universe. And externally refers to the uniquadrantal manifestation of the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, or the impersonal feature of the Lord known as the Brahmajyoti, is clearly explained here and compared to the radiation of the sun. The sunshine may expand all over the universe, but the source of the sunshine, namely the sun planet or the deity known as Surya Narayana, is the basis of such radiation. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of God in Lord Krishna is the basis of the impersonal Brahmajyoti radiation, or the impersonal feature of the Lord. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 14.27. So the universal form of the Lord is the secondary imagination of the impersonal form of the Lord. But the primary form of the Lord is Shyamasundara, with two hands, playing on in his eternal flute. Secondary imagination means it is both secondary and an imagination. Imagination meant to be a part of meditation. 75% of the expansive radiation of the Lord is manifested in the spiritual sky, Tripada Vibhuti. And 25% of his personal radiation comprehends the entire expansion of the material universes. This is also explained and stated in the Bhagavad Gita 10.42. Thus, the 75% expansion of his radiation is called this internal energy, whereas the 25% expansion is called the external energy of the Lord. The living entities who are residents of the spiritual as well as the material expansions are his marginal energy, Tatastha Shakti, and they are at liberty to live in either of the energies, external or internal. Those who live within the spiritual expansion of the Lord are called liberated souls, whereas the residents of the external expansion are called the conditioned souls. We can just make an estimate of the number of the residents of the internal expansions in comparison with the number of residents in the external energy. We may easily conclude that the liberated souls are far more numerous than the conditioned souls. Text 18. Somratasya bhayasyesho bhatyam mannam yad atyagat mahimaishat tato brahman purushasya duratyaya. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the controller of immortality and fearlessness. He is transcendental to depth and the fruitive actions of the material world. O Narada, O Brahmana, it is therefore difficult to measure the glory of the Supreme Person. According to Vamana Purana, There are two types of amshas of the Lord: Swarupamsha and Vibhinamsha. Swarupamsha are what we refer to as Swamsha. Vibhinamsha are the separated portions. Anantasana Vaikuntha Padmanabha Swayam Hari. Lord Hari himself is Lord Padmanabha in Vaikuntha, in the spiritual world, and in Vaikuntha in the material world. And these jivas who are connected with piety, impiety, and so on, these are the separated portions of the Lord. Nitya muktatvam darshayitum utamritattvasya iti asyarthamaha. Now he wants to point out that the Supreme Lord is eternally liberated. And therefore he explains the purport of utamritattvasya sharaha. It's a text of Purusha Sutta through the current verse. न केवलं सर्वात्मकः. Supreme Lord is not just all pervading, किन्तु अमृतत्वस्य निजानन्दस्य अपि ईश्वर इति अर्थः. He is the controller of immortality, which refers to his personal bliss. प्रपञ्चात्मकस्य कुतो नित्यमुक्तत्वम् इति आशङ्क्य तत् परिहाराय एतावानस्य इति अस्य अर्थमाह महिमेति. The second half of this verse is a paraphrase of etavanasya mahima, another verse of the Purusha Sutta, because he anticipates the question: how can the one who is the soul of this material manifestation be eternally liberated? Prapanchatmakasya api amriteshatvam nityesha mahima durattiyo aparaha. This is the unbounded glory of the Lord, that he possesses immortality despite being the soul of material existence. Prapancha anabhibhutatvad iti bhava. The implication is he is not overcome by the features of material existence. Mantrena va etavanasya mahima vibhutihi. Or else, another Purusha Sukta mantra can be taken as a reference for this. Etavanasya mahima. This is the glory of that Lord. It's another Purusha Sukta text. This is the opulence of the Lord, that he is greater than everything in material existence. Tadvibhutayaha padottara khande. The Tripad Vibhuti, Ekapad Vibhuti, they are noted in the Padma Purana, Uttarakhanda. Tripad Vibhute Lokastu Asankhya Parikirta. The words of Tripad Vibhuti, the three-fourth manifestation of the Lord's opulence. That is the literal meaning of Tripad Vibhuti. The words of that portion of the Lord's opulence are described to be innumerable. Shuddha Sattvamaya Sarve. All of them are filled with Shuddha Sattva. Brahmananda Sukhahvaya. And they are referred to as possessing the happiness of the bliss of Brahman. Sarve Nitya Nirvikara Heya Raga Vivarjita. All of them are eternal, devoid of any degrading transformations, and devoid of any attachment which is meant to be given up. Sarve Hiranmaya Shuddha. They are all shining like pure gold. Koti Surya Samaprabha. Their illumination is like that of millions of suns. Sarve Vedamaya Divya. They're all divine and Vedic in nature. Kamakrodhadi Varjita. Devoid of lust, anger, and so on. Narayana Padambhoja Bhakti Eka Rasase Vinaha. They are on the exclusive platform of devotional service to the lotus feet of Narayana. Nirantaram Samagana Paripurna Sukham Shrita. They have always taken shelter of the perfect happiness of singing the glories of the Lord through Sama hymns. And they do this uninterruptedly. Sarve Panchopanishada Swarupa Vedavarchasa. They're shining with Vedic knowledge. And they are the very forms of the five Upanishads, etc., etc. So there are many more verses like this. Padma Purana, Uttarakhanda. अत्र त्रिपाद्विभूति शब्देन प्रपंचातीत लोकः अभिधीयते पादविभूति शब्देन तु प्रपंच इति the expression tripadvibhuti refers to the world beyond material existence, whereas the expression padavibhuti refers to material existence. Yathoktam tatraiva. And that has been stated in that very same Padma Purana portion. Tripad vyapti param dhamni padosya bhavat punaha. Tripad vibhute nityam syat anityam padam aishwaram. Nityam tadrupamishasya param dham nistitam shubham achyutam shashwatam divyam sada yauvanam ashritam nityam sambhogam ishwarya shriya bhumya cha samvrutam. So in that world, that world is eternal. That world which is controlled by the Lord, which is his opulence, is eternal. The Supreme Lord's form, his sacred form, is actually situated in that supreme abode, eternally there. In full shelter of Lord Achyuta, the infallible Lord, who is eternal, who is divine, and who is always youthful. He is the object of great happiness, and he is present with Ishwari, goddess Shri, as well as Bhumi, the Devi Bhudevi. Atevatra Driti Skandepi Evam Eva Uktam. Therefore, in the second canto also, this is how he is described. Athaham somritasyeti. Mritadi doyam tu tatyam. Each of these features is a controller of immortality, is a controller of fearlessness. All of these are set out in the second canto of Bhagavatam itself, chapter 9. We will see these verses. These are all features of the spiritual world, which the Lord will show to Brahma. So the happiness of immortality that is discussed here, this is not a reference to the nectar found in Swarga. Abhayasya, samsara bhaya rahitasya. Because he is the shelter of fearlessness. That means he is the shelter of, he is devoid of the fears of material existence itself. He is far beyond the happiness of sense enjoyment, as well as the features of death. Just as a person who's eating nectar, you'll not be happy to just eat some ordinary food. If at all he were to eat, he would do so without any attachment for it. Similarly, the super soul also, aham hi sarvayagyanam bhokta cha pureva cha. He says that I am the enjoyer of all the fire sacrifices that are performed in this world. But that is not what he is personally relishing. Kvachit bhoktatva pradeshah tad anatikrama eva drashtavya. Sometimes it is said that he is the experiencer or enjoyer of this world. But that simply means that he is not overcome by this world. Just as in the Shruti, it is stated that there are two birds in a tree. One of them is eating the fruit, the other, even though it is not eating the fruit, is stronger by dint of his own intrinsic strength. So, what does it mean? He is not eating the fruit. Nirannatum nama asakti rahityam vyakyatam. It is described that he is devoid of any attachment to this world. In this way, another text of the Purusha Sukta has been explained. This is the unsurmountable glory of the Supreme Lord, the Purusha. The glories of the Lord in the transcendental 75% of the Lord's internal potency are stated in the Padma Purana Uttarakhanda. It is said there that the number of planets in the spiritual sky, which comprises the 75% expansion of the internal potency of the Lord, is far, far greater than the number of planets in the total universes composed of the external potency of the Lord. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the total universes in the external potency of the Lord are compared to a bucket full of mustard seeds. One mustard seed is calculated to be a universe itself. In one of the universes in which we are now living, the number of planets cannot be counted by human energy. So how can we think of the sum total in all the universes which are compared to a bucket full of mustard seeds? And the number of planets in the spiritual sky is at least 3 times the number of those in the material sky. At least. Such planets, being spiritual, are in fact transcendental to the material modes. Therefore, they are constituted in the mode of unalloyed goodness only. The conception of spiritual bliss, Brahmananda, is fully present in those planets. Each of them is eternal, indestructible, and free from all kinds of inebrities, defects, intoxicating defects experienced in the material world. Each of them is self-illuminating and more powerfully dazzling than, if we can imagine, the total sunshine of millions of mundane suns. The inhabitants of those planets are liberated from birth, death, old age, and diseases, and have full knowledge of everything. They're all godly and free from all sorts of material hankerings. They have nothing to do there except to render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Narayana, who is the predominating deity of such Vaikuntha planets. Those liberated souls are engaged incessantly in singing the songs of the Samaveda. Vedai Sangha Padakramo Upanishadai Gayantiyam Samaga. All of them are personifications of the 5 Upanishads. Tripada Vibhuti, or the 75% known as the internal potency of the Lord, is to be understood as the kingdom of God, far beyond the material sky. And when we speak of Ekapada Vibhuti, or the 25% comprising its external energy, we should understand that this refers to the sphere of the material world. It is also said in the Padma Purana that the kingdom of Tripada Vibhuti is transcendental, whereas the Ekapada Vibhuti is mundane. Tripada Vibhuti is eternal, whereas the Ekapada Vibhuti is transient. Transient means temporary. It is manifested, unmanifested, manifested, unmanifested. But Tripada Vibhuti is not like that. It never undergoes creation, maintenance, dissolution. There's no force of time there. There's no Prakriti there. There is no karma there. The Lord and his eternal servitors in the transcendental kingdom all have eternal forms which are auspicious, infallible, spiritual, and eternally youthful. So his servitors also have youthful forms, forms which are auspicious, infallible, spiritual, so on. Eternally youthful. In other words, there is no birth, death, old age, and disease. That eternal land is full of transcendental enjoyment and full of beauty and bliss. This very fact is corroborated in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the transcendental nature is described as Amrita. As described in the Vedas. Uta Amrita Tvasyeshanaha. The Supreme Lord is the Lord of immortality. Or in other words, the Lord is immortal. And because he is the Lord of immortality, he can award immortality to his devotees. In the Bhagavad Gita 8.16, the Lord assures that whoever may go to This abode of immortality shall never return to this mortal land of threefold miseries. The Lord is not like a mundane Lord. A mundane master or Lord never allows his subordinates to enjoy equally with him. Nor is a mundane Lord immortal, nor can he award immortality to his subordinates. The Supreme Lord, who is the leader of all living entities, can award all the qualities of his personality unto his devotees, including immortality and spiritual bliss in the material world. There is always anxiety or fearfulness in the hearts of all living entities, but the Lord, being himself supreme fearless, also awards the same quality of fearlessness to his pure devotee. Mundane existence is itself a kind of fear, because in all mundane bodies, the effects of birth, death, old age, and disease always keep a living being compact in fear. In Vedanta Sangraha also, Ramanujacharya has also mentioned that when the living entity is in material existence, he has to experience unavoidable fear, avarjaniya bhaya. In the material world, there's always anxiety or fearfulness in the hearts of all living entities, but the Lord, being himself the supreme fearless, also awards the same quality of fearlessness to his pure devotees. Mundane existence is itself a kind of fear, because in all mundane bodies, the effects of birth, death, old age, and disease always keep a living being compact in fear. In the mundane world, there is always the influence of time, which changes things from one stage to another. And the living entity, originally being avikar or unchangeable, suffers a great deal on account of changes due to the influence of time. The changing effects of eternal time are conspicuously, noticeably absent in the immortal kingdom of God, which should therefore be understood to have no influence of time and therefore no fear whatsoever. In the material world, so-called happiness is the result of one's own work. One can become a rich man by dint of one's own hard labor, and there are always fear and doubts as to the duration of such acquired happiness. But in the kingdom of God, no one has to endeavor to attain a standard of happiness. Happiness is the nature of the spirit, as stated in the Vedanta Sutras. Anandamaya Bhyasa. The spirit is by nature full of happiness. Happiness in the spiritual nature always increases in volume with a new phase of appreciation. There is no question of decreasing the bliss. Such unalloyed spiritual bliss is nowhere to be found within the orbit of the material universe, including the Janaloka planets, or for that matter, the Maharloka or Satyaloka planets, because even Lord Brahma is subject to the laws of fruitive actions and the law of birth and death. The idea is this: what we have to struggle to attain in this world is very easily attained as an intrinsic property of everyone in the spiritual world. Just as if a person is born in a billionaire family, two parents who have deep affection for their children, basically that boy or girl does not actually have to uh, study hard, get a good job, and so on. Just has to be alive, that's all. Just has to continue to be cooperative, compliant uh, with the wishes of the parents, and so on. That's all they need to do. Prabhupada, in one place, one of his disciples mentioned that Prabhupada, in one place, while he was talking in India about the happiness of a person who is liberated in Krishna consciousness, he said it is like becoming the son-in-law of Birla. And he said, if you become a son-in-law of Birla, you don't have to think what job should I take to maintain my wife. You're already the son-in-law of a millionaire. So when you get the girl as your wife, you get along with that all the money, everything. So it is like that. Once we become a resident of the Vaikuntha universe, all happiness is already there. It is therefore stated here, Duratyaya, or in other words, spiritual happiness in the eternal kingdom of God cannot be imagined even by the great brahmacharis or sannyasis who are eligible to be promoted to the planets beyond the region of heaven. Or the greatness of the Supreme Lord is so great that the happiness in his kingdom cannot be imagined even by the great brahmacharis or sannyasis. But such happiness is factually attained by the unalloyed devotees of the Lord, by his divine grace. Text 19. Padeshu sarva bhutani pumsasthiti padu viduhu amritam kshemam abhayam trimurdhno dhai murdhasu. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is to be known as a supreme reservoir of all material opulences, which constitute the 1/4 of his energy, in which all the conditioned living entities exist. Deathlessness, fearlessness, and freedom from the anxieties of old age and disease exist in the kingdom of God, which is beyond the 3 higher planetary systems and beyond the material coverings. तदेवम् ईश्वरः नित्यमुक्त इत्युक्तं तदाश्रितानां भूतानां बन्धमोक्षो व्यवस्थयाति दर्शयन् पादोऽसि विश्वाभूतानि इति अस्य अर्थमाह पादेषु इति. So he is the one who arranges for the bondage and liberation of all those under him. Now, another text of the Purusha Sutta is explained. तिष्ठति अत्र इति स्थितयः भूरादिलोकाः ते पादाः इव पादाः अंशाः यस्य स स्थितिपात् तस्य पादेषु अंशभूतेषु लोकेषु सर्वान् जीवान् विदुः. He is protecting all the worlds. In the three-path vibhuti, which is related to the Lord, one feature is amritam, eternal happiness. तदेव त्रिपाठ शब्द उक्तं त्रैविध्यं दर्शयनाः त्रयाणां लोकानां मूर्धा महालोकस्य मूर्धानस् तद् उपरितनलोकास् तेषु यथाक्रमम् अमृतादिकम् अथाय निहितम्. He has placed that nectar in the worlds beyond the 3 worlds. Little bit more, little bit more, little bit more, like that. Tatra trilokyam nashwarameva sukham. So in the 3 worlds means bhurvasva. The happiness is temporary. Maharlokasya kramamukti sthanatvepi kalpante tatratyanam sthanatyagan na avinashi sukham. Even though Maharloka is situated for those who are on the pathway for gradual liberation, at the end of every kalpa, the residents of Maharloka have to give up Maharloka. So the happiness there cannot be said to be imperishable happiness. Janaloke tu amritam avinashi sukham. Whereas the immortality in Janaloka is imperishable happiness. Yavajivam swasthana apartyaga, because for his whole life he does not have to give up that world. Into Maharlokavasinam kalpante Triloka daha ushma piritanam tada tatra gamana akshema darshanam asti. But because the residents of Maharloka at the end of a kalpa, they are tormented by the heat that burns up the 3 worlds below them, and they go to Janaloka. People in Janaloka can see that it is not a safe situation. It is not free from all kinds of anxieties. Tapoloke tasya abhavat kshemameva. But in Tapoloka, even that anxiety is not there. So one can say that there is freedom from the anxiety of old age and so on. This will be noted in 3.11.31. In Satyaloka, however, there is fearlessness, which means liberation, because they are about to get liberation. In reality, these features are actually found in the worlds of Sri Vaikuntha, which are beyond material existence itself. Amritam, Kshemam, Abhayam. Whereas in the world of the mortals, you just find ordinary sense objects. Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. अथ तस्य मायिकी रमायिकीश्च विभूतिः विभज्य दर्शयति द्वाभ्याम्. Now in two verses, Lord Brahma, he distinguishes between his Maic opulences and non-Maic opulences. Sthitihi sarvalokapalanam padacharnaravindadyasya sthitipaptasya pumsaha. The Supreme Lord, he protects all the worlds. Adeshu amshabhuteshu maika amaika desheshu. And he protects all the uh, beings in those worlds, in both regions, in the Maic world and in the non-Maic world. Sarva Bhutani, all the creatures, Baddha Mukta Jivan Vidugo, whether they are bound or whether they are liberated. Atracha, Tri Murdhana, Tri Guna Maya Sthananam, Murdha, Iva Uparisthaha Bhaga, Yat Prakriti Avarnam, Tasya Murjasu, Uparidana Sthaneshu, Paravyomasu, Ityarthaha, Amritam, Marana Bhava. In the world beyond the coverings of material existence, that means in the spiritual sky, there is Amritam, which means absence of death. Kshemam, Rogadya Bhavaha, absence of disease and so on. Abhayam. Paraspara hetukasya bhagavat aparadha hetukasya cha bhayasya bhavaha. There is no fear that one will quarrel with each other or one will commit an offense to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Kala hetuka bhayasya amrita shabdenaiva varanam yeyam. This does not refer to fear of the force of time, because that is already dealt with in Amrita, which is lack of death. Adhai sthapitam. So these three features are found fixed in the spiritual world. Ena, Trigunamaya sthaneshu tad viparitam. In the world of the three gunas, we find the exact opposite of this. We find mritam, akshemam, bhayam, chanihitam. These three features are placed in the world of material existence, which is composed of the three gunas. In other words, we find that they are temporary, anitya. Trigunaatitasya paravyomna nityatvam bodhitam. And we understand that in the spiritual sky, which is beyond the three modes, the feature of being eternal is there. This will also be stated in 2.9.10 and so on. Out of the total manifestations of the Sandhini energy of the Lord, 1/4 is displayed in the material world and 3/4 are displayed in the spiritual world. The Lord's energy is divided into three component parts, namely Sandhini, Samvit, and Hladini. In other words, he is the full manifestation of existence, knowledge, and bliss. In the material world, such a sense of existence, knowledge, and pleasure is meagerly exhibited. All living entities, who are minute parts and parcels of the Lord, are eligible to relish such consciousness of existence, knowledge, and bliss very minutely in the liberated stage. Whereas in the conditioned stage of material existence, they can hardly appreciate what is the factual, existential, cognizable, and pure happiness of life. So one cannot hardly realize existence, knowledge, and bliss in material existence. The liberated souls who exist in far greater numerical strength, means who are far more greater in number than the souls in the material world, can factually experience the potency of the above mentioned Sandhini, Samvit, and Hladini energies of the Lord in the matter of deathlessness, fearlessness, and freedom from old age and disease. In the material world, the planetary systems are arranged in three spheres called Triloka, or Swarga, Martya, and Patala, and all of them constitute only 1/4 of the total Sandhini energy. Beyond that is the spiritual sky, where the Vaikuntha planets, exist beyond the covering of 7 material strata. In none of the 3 local planetary systems can one experience the status of immortality, full knowledge, and full bliss. The upper 3 planetary systems are called Sattvika planets because they provide facilities for a long duration of life and relative freedom from disease and old age, as well as a sense of fearlessness. The great sages and saints are promoted beyond the heavenly planets to Maharloka, but that also is not the place of complete fearlessness, because at the end of one kalpa, Maharloka is annihilated, and the inhabitants have to transport themselves to still higher planets. Yet, even on these planets, no one is immune to death. There may be a comparative extension of life, expansion of knowledge, and sense of full bliss, but factual deathlessness, fearlessness, and freedom from old age, diseases, etc., are possible only beyond the spherical, material coverings of the material sky. Such things are situated on the head. Adhayi Murthasu. That means they're situated beyond. X20. Adastrayo Bahishchasan. Aprajanavya Ashrama. Antastrilokyastoparo. Griham Medho Brihad Vrataha. The spiritual world, which consists of 3/4 of the Lord's energy, is situated beyond this material world, and it is especially meant for those who will never be reborn. Others who are attached to family life and who do not strictly follow celibacy vows must live within the 3 material worlds. एतदेव वैचित्र्यम् अधिकारी भेदेन उपपादयन् त्रिपादूर्ध इति अस्य अर्थमाह. This is a paraphrase of another verse of the Purusha Sutta. According to the difference amongst eligible candidates, or according to the gradation of eligibility, one experiences a different set of results. न प्रजायन्ते पुत्रादि रूपेण अप्रजाः नैष्टिक ब्रह्मचारी वानप्रस्थ यतयः तेषाम् आश्रमाः त्रिलोक्या बहिरासन् गृहमेधस्तु अन्तः. Those who have taken up the sinless vow of avoiding having children, which means that they have accepted the vow of celibacy. This refers to the Naishtika Brahmachari, the Vanaprastha man, and the sannyasis. So their abodes are beyond the 3 worlds. Grihamedastu antaha, whereas the one who is a Grihamedi, whose intelligence is fixed at home, he will be within the 3 worlds. Yasmat abrihad vrataha brahmacharya vrata mahitaha, because he is devoid of the vow of brahmacharya. Aprajana brahmacharya vanaprastha yatinam ashrama praptya ye loka. So the worlds beyond the 3 worlds are meant to be attained by the brahmachari, vanaprastha, and sannyasis. अतएव धर्मत्रय प्राप्यत्वा चतुर्णामपि त्रिपात्वं परस्तु. Chakravarti Thakur has interpreted the same in a different manner. He says, this is a reference to the worlds of the spiritual sky. Sometimes these worlds also appear within material existence under the names Mathura, Ayodhya, and so on. So those who will not take birth again. This refers to those who are liberated from material existence. These jivas, their abodes are in that place where eternity is there. Because it was already noted that the spiritual world is being allocated the facilities of immortality, safety, and so on. Whereas uh, the others, the Grihamedis, refer to the karmis. Which kind of karmis? Abrahadvrata, Bhagavad Vrata Rahitaha. Those who have not taken up the great vow, which means they have not taken up the vow pertaining to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, is not a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even such a person, if he becomes a devotee, then he will be given a place within material manifestation. That means if one engages in Bhakti Mishra Karma, and then he quotes the same Padma Purana verses that were quoted by Jiva Goswami in Krama Sandarbha a few verses back. And then he repeats the explanation of Sridhar Swami that the places for the brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis are Dhanaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka. Whereas the grihasthas, who are devoid of the vow of brahmacharya, they reside in the three worlds below Maharloka. The climax of the system of Dharma or Sanatana Dharma is clearly expressed here in this particular verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. The highest benefit that can be awarded to a human being is to train him to be detached from sex life, particularly because it is only due to sex indulgence that the conditioned life of material existence continues birth after birth. Human civilization in which there is no control of sex life is a fourth-class civilization because in such an atmosphere, there is no liberation of the soul engaged in the material body. Birth, death, old age, and disease are related to the material body and they have nothing to do with the spirit soul. But as long as the bodily attachment for sensual enjoyment is encouraged, the individual spirit soul is forced to continue the repetition of birth and death on account of the material body, which is compared to garments subjected to the law of deterioration. In order to award the highest benefit of human life, the Varnashrama system trains the follower to adopt the vow of celibacy, beginning from the order of brahmachari. The brahmachari life is for students who are educated to follow strictly the vow of celibacy. Youngsters who have had no taste of sex life can easily follow the vow of celibacy, and once fixed in the principle of such a life, one can very easily continue to the highest perfectional stage, attaining the kingdom of the three-fourths energy of the Lord. It is already explained that in the cosmos of three-fourths energy of the Lord, there is neither death nor fear, and one is full of the blissful life of happiness and knowledge. A householder attached to family life can easily give up such a life of sex indulgence if he has been trained in the principles of the life of a brahmachari. A householder is recommended to quit home at the end of 50 years, Panchasho Vidvan Vanam Rajet, and live a life in the forest. Then, being fully detached from family affection, he may accept the order of renunciation as a sannyasi fully engaged in the service of the Lord. Any form of religious principles in which the followers are trained to pursue the vow of celibacy is good for the human being, because only those who are trained in that way can end the miserable life of material existence. The principles of nirvana, as recommended by Lord Buddha, are also meant for ending the miserable life of material existence. And this process in the highest degree is recommended here in the Srimad Bhagavatam with clear perception of ideal perfection, although basically there is no difference between the process of Buddhists, Shankarites, and Vaishnavites. Process of getting out of, first of all, sinful life, and then sinless family life, and coming to engagement in activities which don't entangle us back to material life. There is no difference in uh, the process for these things between the Buddhists, Shankarites, and Vaishnavites. For promotion to the highest status of perfection, namely freedom from birth and death, anxiety and fearfulness, not one of these processes allow the follower to break the vow of celibacy. The householders and persons who have deliberately broken the vow of celibacy cannot enter into the kingdom of deathlessness. The pious householders or the fallen yogis or the fallen transcendentalists can be promoted to the higher planets within the material world, 1/4 of the energy of the Lord. But they will fail to enter into the kingdom of deathlessness. Abrihadvratas are those who have broken the vow of celibacy. The vanaprasthas are those retired from family life, and the sannyasis or the renounced persons cannot break the vow of celibacy if they want success in the process. The brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis do not intend to take rebirth, apraja, nor are they meant for secretly indulging in sex life. Such a fall down by the spiritualists may be compensated by another chance for human life and good families of learned brahmanas or of rich merchants for another term of elevation. But the best thing is to attain the highest perfection of deathlessness as soon as the human form of life is attained. Otherwise, the whole policy of human life will prove to be a total failure. Lord Chaitanya was very strict in advising his followers in this matter of celibacy. One of his personal attendants, Chota Haridas, was severely punished by Lord Chaitanya because of his failure to observe the vow of celibacy. For a transcendentalist, therefore, who at all wants to be promoted to the kingdom beyond material miseries, it is worse than suicide to deliberately indulge in sex life, especially in the renounced order of life. Sex life in the renounced order of life is the most perverted form of religious life. And such a misguided person can only be saved if by chance he meets a pure devotee. Okay, so I'll stop with that. Something in the chat box. We see that although after coming to Krishna consciousness, devotees are still struggling with this lust. What is the reason for not getting the higher taste? Offenses. We commit offenses. We are inattentive. That's why we don't commit offenses. These things will go away. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, as per this verse, then sannyasis and brahmacharis, they will be reaching beyond Maharlok or beyond this material universe. Like in one place you said their destinations are Tapalok, Janalok, and Satyalok.
At least they'll go beyond the three worlds. They are sattvic abodes. So if one is in Sattva Guna, then one will go there. If one is transcendental, he will go to the Vaikuntha worlds.
So if one is in beyond three worlds means beyond Maharlok.
No,
If he
three
once
worlds
goes
means
there, will
Bhurбhuva
he only
Swa.
progress?
Three worlds means Bhurбhuva Swa. Beyond that is Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka.
Okay. So if one reaches beyond these three, beyond Swargalok, is it automatic that he will progress upwards only?
If he desires, he can progress.
Hmm. Okay, fine.
All right. We'll stop with that. On Shankar Bhagavan, Vishnu Pasan, the Bheva Chapatitanam Pavane, Vishnu.